安啊，又到讀你聽嘅時間。今日繼續讀 A.Christie 第17節450 from Paddington。咁上回第16節咧就講 Craddock 嘅查案不斷咧就去揾一啲證據啦、證供啦咁樣啦，嫌疑犯嘅證供啦。先後有呢個 Harold 啦，同埋 Alfred 啦。咁呢一節咧已經俾咗預告噶啦 ，Craddock 就係會揾阿 Quimper 同埋 Cedric 嘅，亦都會揾Miss Marple 啦，睇下佢有啲咩 gossip 啦，有啲咩正式嘅證供以外嘅資訊啦咁樣。快啲嚟睇下第17節案情有啲咩進展，好冇 ？Okay, Chapter 17. Craddock had to wait a few minutes whilst Quimper finished his evening surgery, and then the doctor came to him. He looked tired and depressed.He offered Craddock a drink, and when the latter accepted, he mixed one for himself as well. Poor devils, he said as he sank down in a worn easy chair. So scared and so stupid, no sense. And a painful case this evening. Woman who ought to have come to me a year ago. If she'd come then, she might have been operated on successfully. Now it's too late. Makes me mad. The truth is,People are an extraordinary mixture of heroism and cowardice. She's suffering agony and borne it without a word, just because she was too scared to come and find out that what she feared might be true. At the other end of the scale are the people who come and waste my time because they've got a dangerous swelling causing them agony on their little finger, which they think may be cancer and which turns out to be a common or garden chilblain. Well, don't mind me. I've blown off steam now.What did you want to see me about? First, I've got you to thank, I believe, for advising Miss Crackenthorpe to come to me with the letter that purported to be from her brother's widow. Oh, that. Anything in it? I didn't exactly advise her to come. She wanted to. She was worried. All that dear little brothers were trying to hold her back, of course. Why should they? The doctor shrugged his shoulders.Afraid the lady might be proved genuine, I suppose. Do you think the letter was genuine? No idea. Never actually saw it. I should say it was someone who knew the facts, just trying to make a touch, hoping to work on Emma's feelings. They were dead wrong there. Emma's no fool. She wouldn't take an unknown sister-in-law to her bosom without asking a few practical questions first. He added with some curiosity.But why ask my views? I've got nothing to do with it. I really came to ask you something quite different, but I don't quite know how to put it. Dr. Quimper looked interested. I understand that not long ago, at Christmas time I think it was, Mr. Crackenthorpe had rather a bad turn of illness. He saw a change at once in the doctor's face. It hardened. Yes. I gather a gastric disturbance of some kind? Yes. This is difficult.Mr. Crackenthorpe was boasting of his health, saying he intended to outlive most of his family. He referred to you. You'll excuse me, Doctor. Oh, don't mind me. I'm not sensitive as to what my patients say about me. He spoke of you as an old fusspot, Quimper smiled. He said you had asked him all sorts of questions, not only as to what he had eaten, but as to who prepared it and served it. The doctor was not smiling now.His face was hard again. Go on. He used some such phrase as, talk as though he believed someone had poisoned me. There was a pause. Had you any suspicion of that kind? Quimper did not answer at once. He got up and walked up and down. Finally, he wheeled round on Craddock. What the devil do you expect me to say? Do you think a doctor can go about flinging accusations of poisoning here and there without any real evidence? I'd just like to know,off the record, if that idea did enter your head. Dr. Quimper said evasively, Old Crackenthorpe leads a fairly frugal life. When the family comes down, Emma steps up the food. Result, a nasty attack of gastroenteritis. The symptoms were consistent with that diagnosis. Craddock persisted. I see. You were quite satisfied. You were not at all, shall we say, puzzled.All right. Yes, I was yours truly puzzled. Does that please you? It interests me, said Craddock. What actually did you suspect or fear? Gastric cases vary, of course. but there were certain indications that would have been, shall we say, more consistent with arsenic poisoning than with plain gastroenteritis. Mind you, the two things are very much alike. Better men than myself have failed to recognize arsenic poisoning and have given a certificate in all good faith. And what was the result of your inquiries? It seemed that what I suspected could not possibly be true. Mr. Crackenthorpe assured me that he had similar attacks before I attended him, and from the same cause, he said. They had always taken place when there was too much rich food about, which was when the house was full with the family or guests. Yes, that seemed reasonable enough. But frankly, Craddock, I wasn't happy. I went so far as to write to old Dr. Morris. He was my senior partner and retired soon after I joined him. Crackenthorpe was his patient originally. I asked about these earlier attacks that the old man had had. And what response did you get? Quimper grinned. I got a flea in the air. I was more or less told not to be a damn fool. Well, he shrugged his shoulders. Presumably, I was a damn fool. I wonder. Craddock was thoughtful. Then he decided to speak frankly. Throw discretion aside, Doctor. There are people who stand to benefit pretty considerably from Luther Crackenthorpe's death. The doctor nodded. He's an old man, and a hale and hearty one. He may live to be 90 odd, easily. He spends his life taking care of himself, and his constitution is sound. And his sons and daughter are all getting on, and they are all feeling the pinch. You leave Emma out of it. She's no poisoner. These attacks only happen when the others are there, not when she and he are alone. An elementary precaution if she's the one, the inspector thought, but was careful not to say aloud. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Surely I'm ignorant on these matters, but supposing, just as a hypothesis, that arsenic was administered, hasn't Crackenthorpe been very lucky not to succumb? Now there, said the doctor, you have got something odd. It is exactly that fact that leads me to believe that I have been, as old Morris put it, a damn fool. You see, it's obviously not a case of small doses of arsenic administered regularly, which is what you might call the classic method of arsenic poisoning. Crackenthorpe has never had any chronic gastric trouble. In a way, that's what makes these sudden violent attacks seem unlikely. So assuming they are not due to natural causes, it looks as though the poisoner is muffing it every time, which hardly makes sense. Giving an inadequate dose, you mean? Yes. On the other hand, Crackenthorpe's got a strong constitution and might do in another man doesn't do him in. There's always personal idiosyncrasy to be reckoned with. But you'd think that by now the poisoner, unless he's unusually timid, would have stepped up the dose. Why hasn't he? That is, he added, if there is a poisoner, which there probably isn't. Probably all my ruddy imagination from start to finish. It's an odd problem, the inspector agreed. It doesn't seem to make sense. Inspector Craddock, the eager whisper made the inspector jump. He had been just on the point of ringing the front doorbell. Alexander and his friend, Stoddard West, emerged cautiously from the shadows. We heard your car, and we wanted to get hold of you. Well, let's come inside. Craddock's hand went out to the doorbell again, but Alexander pulled at his coat with the eagerness of a pawing dog. We found a clue, he breathed. Yes, we found a clue, Stoddard West echoed. Damn that girl, thought Craddock unamiably. Splendid, he said in a perfunctory manner. Let's go inside the house and look at it. No, Alexander was insistent. Someone's sure to interrupt. Come to the harness room. We'll guide you. Somewhat unwillingly, Craddock allowed himself to be guided round the corner of the house and along into the stable yard. Stoddard West pushed open a heavy door, stretched up, and turned on a rather feeble electric light. The harness room, once the acme of Victorian spit and polish, was now the sad repository of everything that no one wanted. Broken garden chairs, rusted old garden implements, a fast decrepit mowing machine, rusted spring mattresses, hammocks, and disintegrated tennis nets. We come here a good deal, said Alexander. One can really be private here. There were certain tokens of occupancy about. The decayed mattresses had been piled up to make a kind of divan. There was an old rusted table on which reposed a large tin of chocolate biscuits. There was a hoard of apples, a tin of toffees, and a jigsaw puzzle. It really is a clue, sir, said Stoddard West eagerly, his eyes gleaming behind his spectacles. We found it this afternoon. We've been hunting for days in the bushes and inside hollow trees. We went through the ash bins. There were some jolly interesting things there, as a matter of fact. And then we went into the boiler house. Old Hillman keeps a great galvanized tub there full of waste paper, for when the boiler goes out and he wants to start it again. Any odd paper that's blowing about, he picks it up and shoves it in there. And that's where we found it. Found what? Craddock interrupted the duet. The clue! Careful, Stoddard. Get your gloves on. Importantly, Stoddard West, in the best detective story tradition, drew on a pair of rather dirty gloves and took from his pocket a Kodak photographic folder. From this, he extracted in his gloves' fingers with the utmost care a soiled and crumpled envelope which he handed importantly to the inspector. Both boys held their breath in excitement. Craddock took it with due solemnity. He looked at the boys and he was ready to enter into a spirit of the thing. The letter had been through the post. There was no enclosure inside. It was just a torn envelope, addressed to Mrs. Martine Crackenthorpe, 126 Elvers Crescent, N10. You see, said Alexander breathlessly, it shows she was here, Uncle Edmund's French wife, I mean. The one there's all the fuss about. She must have actually been here and dropped out somewhere. So it looks, doesn't it? Stoddard West broke in. It looks as though she was the one who got murdered. I mean, don't you think, sir, that it simply must have been her in the sarcophagus? They waited anxiously. Craddock played up. Possible, very possible, he said. This is important, isn't it? You'll test it for fingerprints, won't you, sir? Of course, said Craddock. Stoddard West gave a deep sigh. Smashing luck for us, wasn't it? He said. On our last day, too. Last day? Yes, said Alexander. I'm going to Stoddard's place tomorrow for the last few days of the holidays. Stoddard's people have got a smashing house. Queen Anne, isn't it? William and Mary, said Stoddard West. I thought your mother said. Mum's French. She doesn't really know about English architecture. But your father said it was built. Craddock was examining the envelope. Clever of Lucy Eye's barrel. How had she managed to fake the postmark? He peered closely, but the light was too feeble. Great fun for the boys, of course, but rather awkward for him. Lucy, drat her, hadn't considered that angle. If this were genuine, it would enforce a course of action. There. Beside him, a learned architectural argument was being hotly pursued. He was deaf to it. Come on, boys, he said. We'll go into the house. You've been very helpful. 咁呢一節就主要係講阿 Quimper 啦嘅證供啦嚇，佢都表現出佢係維護住阿 Emma 嘅，咁亦都講咗佢係冇睇過封信嘅。咁另外一方面咧就係又講翻呢個莊園嘅少主人啦 ，Alexander 啦，同佢嘅朋友啦，咁繼續原來佢哋咧一路都冇放棄喺度揾線索喎，咁真係俾佢揾到封信喎，而呢一封信咧暫時就未經鑑定啦，咁所以就唔確認究竟會唔會係俾呢個 Martine Crackenthorpe 嘅呢封信就係話係寄俾呢個 Martine Crackenthorpe，但係點解會喺一個咁唔起眼嘅一個地方咧？係咪有人故意將佢當垃圾咁抌喺度咧？但係點解唔燒咗佢咧？點解要留翻呢個證據咧？同大家分享幾個字啦 ，chilblain， 咁呢個文中一開始咧就有講噶啦，咁其實照字面解咧都知道 chilblain 咧意思就係凍瘡，係啦，凍瘡。咁一開始就係講呢個 Dr. Quimper 喺度一輪嘴喺度抱怨啦，對住阿 Craddock 咁喺度抱怨啦，就係話而家啲人一係有大膽，一係冇膽匪女。嗰啲冇膽匪女咧就點咧？就少少嘢少生個細瘡走嚟同我講話好大件事，其實就係凍瘡啫嘛，最多咪係咁樣。Chilblain purport 咁意思即係表現出嚟嘅，流露出嚟嘅。咁但係咧就唔一定係真實嘅appear to be or do something especially falsely purport 咁所以呢個字其實係含有一啲貶義喺度，即係佢表現出嚟，但實際上唔係嘅。但係個意思唔係深藏不露啊！如果深藏不露就唔係就唔係貶義。呢個 purport 係有啲貶損性喺度少少，係啦，即係有啲嘢要收埋咁樣。第三個字啦，perfunctory。咁啊，文中有講最尾嗰度啦，就係啲男仔喺度，我哋去睇啦咁樣，跟住嗰兩位男士啦嘅反應就係 perfunctory， 即係好啦，咁即係其實就係中文嘅解釋就係不痛不癢啦，英文就係without real interest 啦，without real feeling or effort 啦，即係都好啦，求其啦，敷衍啦，perfunctory。咁呢3個字先啦，咁我哋下一節呢個封信啊，會唔會有啲鑑定啊，或者 Miss Marple 啊，佢哋有啲咩講啦？拜拜。